Wise, who was sharing the information with you. She's the station manager. Give her a call and you can have your own broadcast on Boston Praise Radio and TV. Well, I feel like dancing when it rains. And this morning, I have I have on the line a young lady that I have known for a long time. Her name is Vanessa Daniels, and she and I go back so long that I don't know if I want to go back. Yeah, we'll go back. And so I'd like us to welcome you to Boston Praise Radio and TV. This is your first time, and
Thank you.
I think you're the only person that I have interviewed recently in a different time zone. And I was laughing last night when we were trying to get the time. I called Renee. I said, "Hey, I want to make sure I got this right because I could hear things wrong. When am I supposed to interview Vanessa?" So she said, we finally said 11 o'clock. And I said, okay, so I sent out all my information at 11 o'clock. Then I said, there's something wrong here. So we're going back with 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We both said, let's make it 10 and let's get it done. So sorry for some of that confusion, but I was trying to line things up. And I've got so many interviews, I sometimes forget where I'm at and what I'm doing. So welcome
Right.
again.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
let's go back before we go forward and talk about how it all started with our friendship, our connection at 12th Baptist Church. What age did you come to 12th Baptist Church, and why did you go to 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury?
Great questions, Bruce. So I think I was probably either 13 or 14. And my sister and mom and I had been talking about getting to a church. We hadn't been going to church at all. And I think it was my sister and I who approached my mom. We had moved from Virginia when we were very, very young. She had some church hurt, and
Hmm.
yet a lot of our friends went to church and talked about it all the time. And so
Hmm.
we wanted to go. So we visited many, ended up at 12th Baptist Church. And I will never forget the very first Sunday we went, Reverend Haynes his message was on the fatherhood of God. Now, my
Uh,
dad had died when I was 9, but I had no relationship with him before that.
hmm.
And so that message spoke heavily to me. I always wanted a father figure. I envied friends who had dads. I tried to adopt a few, but that message spoke heavily to me because there was one message in it specifically where he said, there are deadbeat dads, there are good dads, there are bad dads, but God as father trumps them all. I
Hmm.
never even thought about God as father.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that invitation called me to walk forward. And I'll never forget, um, at the invitation, I stepped out of the aisle. I think I was sitting on the end and just immediately walked forward, didn't say anything to my sister Sean or my mom. And the next thing I knew, they were following behind me. So that's how it started. And then
Well,
we
that
eventually
was the
jumped
first time you walked down the aisle?
the very first time. Mhm.
Wow. Wow. Go ahead. You were going to say something else?
No, I was just saying that that message was just that powerful, and I didn't know God at that point, but
Hmm.
I understood that He had been with me even when I didn't know Him. And so, in that message, with that invitation, I knew that it was more than Reverend Haynes's message. God was using Reverend Haynes as His instrument to get me to make the decision that I did, which was to give my life to Jesus. And
Hmm.
then we immediately got involved in youth fellowship. And of course, I met you. And I don't remember how we started connecting and talking. I think I had done message for Martin Luther King's birthday or something. And so then you asked me to do it for the youth fellowship on a Friday night, which I did. And that was phenomenal
Hmm.
experience because I began to connect with a lot of youth and a lot of the youth workers like Beverly and Brenda and Glenette. And then we just started doing a lot of the youth fellowship things. And the next thing I knew, I was working with you with social action and just a lot of stuff, and the relationship just grew. But in those moments, You served as a youth pastor, but
Hmm.
also as a confidant because I was struggling with so much stuff, not just
Hmm.
because my dad wasn't there, but my mom and I were going through a lot of the teenage crazy.
Hmm.
And, then working together as co-laborers in Christ and as a big brother and really as a father figure. I yearned for a father, and
Yeah.
you stepped in as that figure for me, and I was just very, very grateful.
So, talk to me about the youth choir. When did you join the youth choir at the church at 12th Baptist, and why?
Um, I don't remember the exact time. I might have been, I think there was an entry age. So I might have been 15 or 16.
Did,
Whatever that
did you have to
initial.
fill out an application to get in?
I don't remember that.
Okay, all right.
I don't think so. I think I just started showing up at choir rehearsals. And then my mom and sister and I loved to sing. We would sing around the house all the time from the time we were kids. Um, one was a mezzo soprano, high soprano. The other was a soprano, and then I was alto. So we harmonized all the time, and we did so at the church as well. And so I had met a lot of the members of the youth choir in the youth fellowship, and to be able to connect with them and rub arms with them and do life with them also through the youth choir was just another extension of grace that God gave me to be able to be part of a community and part of a family. So yeah, and we loved to sing, and I loved all of the youth choir. All the choirs at 12 Baptist Church were phenomenal, but to be part of the youth choir started that whole experience. And then we started traveling together and everything too. And so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun going to Washington, D.C., and going with Annie Mason down
Oh,
south,
yes.
all of those opportunities. You know, I remember at 12th when Reverend Haynes would ask the ushers to put the chairs in the middle of the aisle at 10. The service started at 11,
Hmm.
and people were coming in and filling the church up at 10:30.
Hmm.
And so he said, put the chairs in the aisle because the balcony is full, the main sanctuary is full. It was an amazing experience. My last comment about the church before we move on to the book. Um, he used to ask me to welcome the visitors on Sunday and read the notices. I hated that. I hated it. I hated it. I didn't want to do it. But I guess his whole idea was to put a younger person up there to do it. And we have people welcoming visitors, but I'm very careful because I knew how much I hated to do that. Sometimes there were words I couldn't pronounce, names I couldn't read, and it was just crazy. But it all worked. All of us worked together to make our fellowship inviting, where people came to know Christ, and we're still walking with Christ in our lives after all that we've all gone through. So let's
Yeah,
talk a little bit about you were a part of a project. I did some research on Unlock Your Voice. Is that the book that you were one of the, I think was it 11 other Kingdom women?
there were. There were a total
Talk
of
to us
12
about
of
that.
us. Sure. So, it's interesting because I knew after my sister died in 2007 that
Mhm.
I was supposed to write a book. I
Mm.
journaled, I wrote a couple of other little things for work, projects and assignments. And so I've always loved the power of words. I loved the power of communication. I loved writing, but I never took it a step further than that. Life happened. I didn't know about the whole publication part. Even the journaling that I did, I had every intention of going back to that and formulating it into some type of manuscript, and I never did. Then when Mark passed, I knew all the more that I was
Mm.
supposed to write a book. That was 5 years ago. And I journaled then, but I still didn't do it. I was so sunken in grief that there was not a whole lot that I was doing except getting up and functioning from day to day,
Yeah.
especially in those first 5 years. And then I think it was in December of 2022, a coach who had been part of another program with me, an online program. She actually lives in Cape Town, South Africa, reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in serving as one of At that time, she didn't know how many authors, but she knew that it was going to be a multi-author book. If I would write a chapter for this book called Unlock Your Voice. Well, my voice had been locked down for 5 years, actually 3 at that point, because of Mark's death. I mean, I lost my voice, lost my identity, lost my purpose. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know which end was up. I was just barely functioning. And so the title alone spoke volumes to me because God was just beginning to do some new things in my life. And it wasn't just him doing it. I was allowing him to. I had moved, sold my house, done some things that I had never done before, and didn't have courage to do it at that point. So when I was on the call with her and she asked me, I knew that it wasn't just an invitation from her. It was an invitation from the Lord to do something that I had been called to do 17 years prior to that. So there was no hesitation, no thought. I immediately said yes. Mind you, this is in December. It was like a couple of weeks before Christmas. I did not have the wherewithal to do any writing for that month because Christmas holidays. And she said, well, will you be able to, turn in 3,000 words by February 1st? And I'm like, sure, not a problem. And then I got off the call with her and I'm like, what did I just commit to?
Yeah, I
I
know.
don't know if I'm going to have time to do that. The first week of January, I had the flu. I was sick as a dog. I'd started writing, but I was sick as a dog. I was a week or 2 in January that I couldn't do anything. And I almost pulled out. I remember crying one day in the midst of my sickness, going, God, I thought I heard you
Yeah,
invite me to this, but
yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. And in a week, I was able to write what I hadn't been able to write for almost a month before that, because I just spent some time with him, poured my heart out to him, partnered with him. And he said, okay, let's go. And I pulled up to the laptop, everything that I had written before, just pushed aside, and it just flowed and it was done in a week. So I was actually ahead of the deadline to get it done. So it was a powerful experience, really, really powerful experience, and the seed for this book. So
I I have a wall in the studio, and it has books on top of it. James Grant, who used to attend 12th Baptist Church, wrote a 600-page book. That was his second one. He's on his third one.
wow.
And different people, Karen, my wife Karen's book, and all these different authors that we've interviewed here at the station. And I sometimes I just get too overloaded to have to read everybody's book in order to interview them. It's just too much. It overwhelms me.
I get it.
And just going back to the other book, The Unlocking Your Voice, it says that there were women from South Africa, the Philippines, and the United States. They all came together and did this. So when I said yes, that I would participate and work on one of the people to work on a forward for your new book, your solo book, making sure I say your solo book.
Yes.
I really struggled with it. I felt it would have been much better for Karen to do it because she's an author. She knows all of this. And I said, no, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So once I sent you the text and it went in the airways, before it got to you, I was asking myself the question, what did I just commit myself to? And it sounds like you. Did I really hear from the Lord to do this? And then when you sent me the 2 chapters, what I was supposed to read, um, it really touched me, and it made it a little easier to try to figure out what to say. So now that you uh, have your own solo book, that you talk to us about writing that. How did you come from? What confidence did you gain in working with those ladies to be able to write the story about your relationship with Mark and all facets of that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Because as I was writing the 3,000 words for Unlock Your Voice, um, I wasn't initially sure what parts of my story to include and what to leave
Yeah,
out, because you can't
yeah,
tell the whole story in 3,000 words. You can't
yeah.
even tell it all in a book. But I knew that it was important to include enough of my story, plus the divine revelation and tools and insight that God had given me to heal, in order for it to be complete. Because just to tell a story about loss, nobody wants to hear that.
Mm,
People experience loss every single day,
mm,
and nobody wants to be reading someone else's story about loss and then plunged into sadness or
yeah,
depression or whatever.
yeah,
And so I knew I couldn't leave it there. It was important to, share enough of the story to also, but also to give enough hope and enough
yeah,
tools and enough steps and tips that people who were also grieving or dealing, not even necessarily from the loss of a death of a loved one, but there's all kinds of loss that we all deal with, to be able to move forward. So that chapter helped me frame the message on a smaller scale. I knew when I finished it, and God said, "We're not done." I'm like, "What do you mean we're not done? It took me 17 years to do this chapter. How are we not
wow,
done?"
wow,
He said, um, let's keep going. So I am a transition life coach, and I was coaching people in one-on-ones at that point, but he was calling me to coach groups. Well, to do groups and to have a consistent, not just message, but tools and action steps that people could work on, it was important for me to kind of frame that a little bit more. So I will never forget it. I thought it was going to be like a 10-page little booklet. It ended up being a 115-page workbook,
mm,
which was powerful. And I use that now. It's 12 modules that my clients go through. But then even after that, he's like, "We're not done." So from that, I did another online course on identity, because that was a big thing. When Mark died, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my purpose. And I've realized that a lot of us as believers, even though we frame ourselves as believers and we know that we're Christians and we know that we love Jesus, we still define ourselves by titles and accolades, by the
mm,
things that change. And God showed me when Mark died and all that went away that that's not who I am. So learning to define myself, my identity, my true identity as his daughter was huge. And
mm.
so I did an online course on that. And there were a couple of other things. And then he still said, "We're not done." I'm like, "What do you mean we're not done?" Well, he kept taking me back to that chapter, reminding me that that was just a seed that I had planted, that that was a first step to really get the full story out there, and all of the other um, kingdom tools and divine insights and wisdom and truth that he had flooded my soul with in order to help me climb up out of the ashes and heal.
Mm, mm,
So that's how the book started. And my book coach also kept encouraging me. She's like, "Your chapter in Unlock Your Voice, do you know how many people's lives are going to be changed just by that?" She said, "I know there's a lot more to that story." And so her encouragement also helped me to keep going.
How did you, why did you decide that you needed a book coach? Where did that come from? How did you think that through?
I didn't even decide. I think when God calls us to do something beyond our comfort
Mm,
zone and
okay,
beyond the thing that we do, he also
okay,
equips us with people who help us to get it done. So my
mm,
book coach is the same person that asked me to write the chapter. And
okay,
when I say she's my book coach, it's not like we had thousands of meetings. We had a couple of meetings. I already had the gift of writing that God had given me, but to frame it in a way that sells books or that communicates a powerful message, she helped with that. And I attended a couple of her classes to be able to do that.
mm,
Interestingly enough, during the process of, I think it was soon after Unlock Your Voice was published, the Lord also led her, Megan, to create her own publishing company. So
okay,
in writing Dancing in Rain, I didn't have to look for editors or publishers or anything. I just stayed with her and was able to get it edited. And I worked with a graphic artist. Although the picture that I used for the cover, I found on my own, there was just something that I needed to resonate the story in a powerful way. And so this picture actually spoke volumes to me. But anyway, so the graphic artist, and then someone to help me market it, and even to format it and
mm,
add a lot of the creative elements that have been added, was all done within her company, all the way up through to publishing and getting it uploaded on Amazon. So I didn't have
mm,
to do any of that on my own. God knew that if I had to, this book probably never would have gotten done, because
Mhm.
that's just not the world that I live in. And
Mhm.
I don't operate in fear or trepidation of the unknown. But when it is so far out of my comfort zone that I'm like, yeah, it's not even worth the time to do, then sometimes I procrastinate and don't do it, which is exactly what happened for those 17 years. So he's like, I'm going to remove that from you. Here you go.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Wow. I just want you to know that Beverly Byron is on Facebook watching us right now.
oh, very cool.
And she said, I remember the three of you singing in the combined choir.
Oh, talking about my mom and sister night.
Yeah.
We sure
Yeah.
did. From youth choir, we went to the combined choir too.
Wow.
But
Wow.
those were some powerful years.
They were, and those years became my life coach experience. Those years. I remember at your wedding. Karen and I flew out. We were there to witness this, and then we came back. I think I was in your house. I know I was in
Yeah.
your house, and met Mark briefly. Met him briefly. So that whole experience. Sometimes as a youth pastor, when you've been blessed to pastor hundreds or thousands of young people as a single man. And then you get married, you have your own children, you leave the nesting, the 12th Baptist Church, and you're out on your own with a whole new group of people. I sometimes I feel sad that I cannot connect to people like you and others the way that I used to when I was single, and I just had all the time in the world to do it. Time is restricted right now for me. And when I learned of the transition of Mark, and how it happened, it shook me because I've had multiple heart attacks,
Mm,
and I survived.
mm,
And so when I heard of his passing, it really shook me. So that's the other reason why I wanted to find a way to be involved in supporting you through this whole process of writing your book and telling your story. So the two chapters, were they chapters that you sent to me, or was just smaller selections of the chapters for me to
no, so
read?
they were chapters. They were, I believe I sent the introduction, the first chapter, and the last
Okay.
chapter.
Okay.
And that was with the intent of, I wanted people who I had invited to write testimonials to be able to understand what they were even writing about.
Sure,
But
sure,
I
sure.
also shared it with several very close friends, because I wanted to get feedback on the content. And I specifically shared those chapters because the introduction and the first chapter kind of frame the rest of the story. Although the full story of Mark's illness and getting to the hospital, and then,
Yeah.
being crushed by his loss, that didn't come till chapter 2. And I hadn't even written that yet. I didn't write that until last. That was the other thing. I didn't write the book linearly. Like, I didn't start from the introduction and go to the end. I think I wrote chapter 10 first and then worked backwards and then filled in. It was very interesting. I wrote as I felt led, and that second chapter was the hardest to write, so I
Hmm.
wrote it last. But in answer to your question, I shared those chapters because chapter 10, which also has the name of the book, Dancing in Rain, brings it all together. And so
Yeah.
even though I didn't share the middle,
Yeah.
that chapter kind of gave a glimpse of what the rest of the book was. And I think that it put a good pin in it. So yeah, and
Well,
I'm sorry.
okay.
No, I was just going to say, going back to what you're saying about the wedding and, coming to the house and meeting Mark. I remember that as well. And I remember Mark and I talked often about visiting Boston. I wanted him to meet you and Beverly and others that had played very key roles in my development and in my Christian walk, and getting, rooted and grounded in God's love. But every time we talked about traveling, we were going, to the West Coast or somewhere else. And so you, I think, only met him for the wedding during that
Yeah.
time frame.
Yeah.
And yet, even as he remembered you and talked about you, there was already a connection, so I appreciated even your call when you found out that he passed. That meant the world. I was so shut down at that point. I don't even remember what I said. I just remember the call and remember the offer of support and connection. But you're right. I mean, lives move in different directions. And so even though we all spent so much time together in Boston during those formative years, God called us to different places. And so we had to be obedient to that call and kind of do and go where he called us to go and do. And even though time passes and touch is lost, when we come back together, it's picked up as if, there's been no time lost at all.
Right.
So
We're going to get more into the book, Dancing in the Rain, but Beverly Byron said, Vanessa's book is a powerful testimony of God's love, grace, and healing power. Thank you, Vanessa, for stepping out of your comfort zone.
Oh,
so again, people that want to know more about your book, first, I received something from you that talked about the New York Times bestseller. What was that all about?
No, it wasn't New York Times. It hasn't reached that yet, and I don't know if it ever will. But we uploaded on Amazon.
Amazon.
Okay. Yes, and so Amazon has multiple categories that a book can be showcased in, and keywords and all of that. And I had no expectations at all. I knew that I had done what God called me to do. I knew that what I had written was vulnerable, it was personal, but it was also, like I said, full of hope and full of steps that people could take, no matter what area of loss they were in order to not only heal, but also to thrive and soar. I knew that. So I knew that there was an anointing on it because God had breathed the words through me. And it had been a very difficult experience. I thought I would be finished writing it in 30 to 60 days. It took 9 months. So I knew all of that. But beyond that, I had no expectations. So when we launched it and uploaded it to Amazon, and I think probably within the first couple of hours, it was already hitting #1 new release in multiple different categories. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? So then within the next 24 hours, I think it was not even the next day, it had also hit #1 bestseller in a couple of categories as well. Now, what happens on Amazon is that as people are buying books, those categories and those statuses change frequently. And yet my book stayed at #1 new release in, I think it was 2 or 3 different categories that it kept flipping back and forth between for like 2 or 3 weeks. That blew my mind. And so again, what I saw in that was the hand and the favor of God on my obedience, on my vulnerability, on my on the writing, on the words that he sent through, and even on the cover, because people have talked a lot about that. I've gotten a lot of feedback in texts and in phone calls. There's a few reviews on Amazon, but there are a whole lot of other people that are like, I need to write a review and I'm going to, but I just want to make sure that I frame it correctly. So the feedback has just been overwhelming, and it has humbled me and just made me know that when you say yes to God, no matter what he's asking you to do, even if it's out of your comfort zone, even if it makes you vulnerable, even if it exposes you, because there's a lot of stuff that I talk about in here that I have never shared with anyone else before, that the return on that investment, so to speak, the blessings of God, the favor of God, the goodness of God is beyond what you can imagine. And I know he's still not done, still being able to connect with groups and organizations and people who need that hope. And I really want to turn this into a workbook as well. I think there's some elements of it that I can frame as questions for people to work through. The first step of that was putting notes pages after every chapter for people to be able to write down the things that God was speaking to them as they read. But I want to turn it into a workbook as well, as a companion piece for it. So.
What you said at the beginning of the interview is that people who have experienced what you've experienced or are going through it now, the process is starting to play out, probably would not want to pick up a book that's going to, in their minds, plunge them deeper into despair. But your book, what I read, doesn't do that. You're able to tell stories and to tell a story of love. That was that was Holy Spirit led. But when you made a decision that I don't want to write something that's going to sink people further into despair, how did you how did you come up with the concept? How did you say, you know what? Now I know how to frame this. How did that happen?
That's kind of a hard question to answer because I don't think I fully framed it on my own. I
Hmm.
took it to the Lord and I said, God, you know how lost I was. You know how
Yeah.
jacked up, messed up, broken, crushed I
Mm.
was.
That's a
I don't
lot.
want to
That's a
share
lot.
that. It is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to just package that and put it on people's laps
Yeah.
because I don't want
Yeah.
them to feel broken and crushed and crying all the time
Yeah.
either. Now, there are places in the book where I'm sure, and people have said, you need a hanky, you need some tissue.
Right. Sure.
But I was like, glad I want this book to reflect faith, joy, even in the hard stuff, being able to bring the hard stuff to you and sit in it with you and watch you transform it.
Mm.
So he's like, okay. So even the first chapter is not about the loss. It's about how Mark and I got engaged, which was one of the most joyful time frames of my life. I wanted
Right.
to start it off with
Yep.
joy and to also then see the power of a marriage when the two are joined by a third strand, which is Jesus. And so
Mhm.
and also wanted to share what it means to actually put your spouse before you and to build them up, which is exactly what Mark did, in order to celebrate me and to love me beyond what I could imagine.
Mhm.
So I started with that and then talked about the power of marriage because I also wanted to frame just how powerful our marriage was so that when I got to share the part of the loss, people could understand just why I got so crushed. It wasn't
Mhm.
just, I'm in a relationship or we dated or whatever, and now that person is not here, and now I've picked up and moved on to another thing. It was excruciating to do
Yeah.
that. The
Yeah.
reason why was because we truly had become one flesh. So
Mhm.
I think to answer your question, that's a long way around to say that I don't think I made the decision. I think that I took the step of obedience. I said yes to God to share the story. Then I had no clue what I needed to put in it. Then I knew that I wanted it to be more than just death. I wanted it to be joy and faith and resurrection. And God showed me which stories to include. There are so many more that I could have.
Yeah.
And yet he was like, no, let's focus on these. And so those are the stories that I told.
So when you finally got through these chapters, your your coach, the publisher, had a team and read it. When they read the full story, what did they say to you? What did they say that they think they had?
Oh my gosh, every single one of them from Megan and even her husband. And this was kind of special. So Megan lives in South Africa. So our communication has been on Zoom and on Facebook Messenger. And there was one day, I think I had shared the whole book with her, the whole manuscript with her, because she was also going to write the foreword for me.
Okay.
And I guess she had shared it with her husband because one day I noticed that there was a voice message on Messenger. I thought it was Megan because it was on our thread, and it
Yeah.
actually ended up being her husband. And
Wow.
he said, Vanessa, he said, I just want to let you know the gold that is in this book. These are not his
Wow.
exact words, but basically he was saying, this is not just a book, it's a movement. He said, and it's designed to give people hope, to transform them, to give them an opportunity to understand how to be set free and to be set on a high place to be able to do everything that God has called them to do. Now, that's a reframe of his words, but basically he said that this is somebody that's not even involved in the project
Mm.
that has read it. Megan said the same thing. I don't know if you've read the forward, but she said it's the best book on grief that she's ever read. And, just I infused some humor through it, people have talked about it being even, like a poetic, the words that are used. And a lot of the words that are used, I'm like, are you sure you're talking about my book? But again, they're talking about what Holy Spirit breathed through me. The editor, who read it when she first read the book, she said, Vanessa, I don't write reviews for people. She said, but there's something in this book that everybody needs to hear. She said, and I will be one of the first to write a review for you. She did it through her mother's account on Amazon. I've had so much feedback like that. And again, it's kind of blown my mind because that wasn't the intent. And when I think about just the impact of the story, just how hard the story was living through it, I'm still thinking they're talking about a story that about something that happened to me that almost destroyed my life, and yet God has redeemed every bit of it. So it's been a powerful experience. This book is not just for people who are reading it, it's also for me as well. Sitting in it, taking 9 months to write it, God took me to deeper levels of healing and freedom than I was even before that. And he's opening up doors of opportunity and impact, and next levels even for my business to grow than I ever could have imagined. So,
well, we have a few minutes left. So how close to the brink of real depression did you go? And how did you climb out of it? Because there's somebody that will be listening to this on our FM station. They'll be watching it on Facebook. They'll be watching it on YouTube. How close did you get? How did you climb out? How did God pull you out of it?
really good questions. I think I got about as low as you can go, and to the point where there were days that I wanted to die too. I was like, now I wasn't suicidal, although I thought about it. And there were days that I thought, God, if you just don't allow me to wake up tomorrow, I'll be okay with that. Or if I'm in a car and I'm in traffic and I'm flying down the road and there's a guardrail there and all of a sudden, oops, I've lost control of the wheel. Oops, I'm gone. I'm okay with that. I was not suicidal, but I believe that was only because of God's grace, because of the relationship I had with him before Mark passed. He was always with me, even when I was fighting against him and even when I didn't want him to be. And so he sustained me. There was a day I was sitting in a chair. It was after grief share. I did go to grief share, and that helped me to know that all of my crazy emotions, that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't insane, that I would be okay. And yet I still didn't have the tools to move forward. I sat in a chair and I was asking God again, who am I and what is my purpose and why am I still here and why didn't you take me and why didn't you give Mark back? And that's when he told me, you are my beloved daughter. And you still are. You were before Mark even came. Mark was my gift to you, but he is not your purpose. I am. That broke some of that darkness. I hadn't been able to worship or do anything, but that broke some of the darkness so that I was able to worship for hours like I hadn't been able to before. But then I think it was more the day-to-day of me realizing that things that I hadn't had to do before, that he was bringing people to help me, or that he was showing me how to do it, or he was providing ways out, or he was, even financially, money was coming and I didn't even know it was coming from. I just saw his hand in my life where I didn't expect it and where I honestly didn't want it. And then a year after Mark died, I remember thinking, you're not dead. How are you not dead? You should have been gone in this year. I know of stories of couples who are so close that one is and the next one is gone. And I thought I was going to be those. But here I am a year later. And God said to me, this was the real beginning of my change. He's like, it is my breath that's in your lungs that has kept you alive. And I'm not done with your living yet. And I know you don't understand. I know you don't like it, but I need you to trust me. And I need you to know that if you trust me, there is so much more goodness on the other side of all of this than you can even imagine. But I need you to look up from your pain. And I need you to know that even in the midst of your pain, I'm with you. Jesus, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and I'm going to make this real short, he knew what was on the other side of the crucifixion. He and the Father and the Holy Spirit had that plan long before the world was created. And yet in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was in such anguish about facing the cross and all that was going to happen that his sweat was like drops of blood. For the first time in all the years that I had been walking with God, I understood what that meant. Because even though my sweat didn't have drops of blood in it, I experienced that level of anguish. And yet, Jesus said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And I was able to say the same thing when he showed me that it was his breath in my lungs, that he had done in me what I hadn't been able to do. And that gave me hope. Was it easy after that? No. Did I still have a whole lot of more dark days after that? Yes. But I learned the power of saying, yes, God, and the power of looking up and the power of wrestling with God, like Jacob did, and not letting go until he blessed me. There's no magic sauce for it, and everybody's journey of loss is different, grief is different. But the one thread that I know is common to all who survive it, and that is recognizing who you are in him, knowing that we serve the King of all kings, and that he is never going to leave us or forsake us, and he will give us and equip us with every tool and every power we need to survive every single storm we go through.
That's good. Lisa Texera is watching us. Sean Bryant is watching us, and Beverly can't stop writing. And she said,
Can't wait to see it.
we got to pull that book out of her. The way you were together, your personal experiences, your biblical lessons and illustrations and humor are truly amazing. Okay, the next time I interview you, we're going to have Beverly here so she can ask you some questions.
That would be an awesome conversation.
That would be something. So you're going to be putting together a workbook coming out of this work.
I hope so.
But I know you don't want me to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. How many more books are in you?
I knew you were going to ask that. I can't answer that. I don't know. I do know that writing the chapter for Unlock Your Voice and now writing this one has birthed something within me that I know is not done. I also know that, whether it's Megan's husband who spoke it prophetically, or the Holy Spirit who also said to me that there are more books in me. I love to write. I love the power of writing, and I love the power of words. So I know there's more, but I don't know how many, and I don't know when. I believe that I will write a workbook, and I don't know whether I'm going to upload it to Amazon or whether I'm just going to make it available to like clients, or I've created a Facebook group for those who help me launch the group. I want to launch the book. So I'll probably start it with them and then see how that goes. But I love things that, people like Lisa Turkhurst and Joyce Meyer, they write a book and then they have a companion workbook together. I would love to do some of that. I know that there are also stories that I was not able to include in this volume of Dancing in Rain that could be told in future volumes. And I think I would like to maybe do a multi-author book, be the curator for a multi-author book for other women like myself to be able to share their stories as well. So short answer is I believe that God is calling me to write more books, but I don't know exactly how many or when. And I don't know if any of us really know that. I'm just going to continue to trust him and submit myself to him and partner with him and keep saying yes to whatever it is he asks me to do. So
they have labeled me, I am a community activist. There are community activists and there are community thinkers. They can think through the whole process of reaching their goal, but they never kind of write it out. I'm I'm more of a community activist. I do it, but I haven't written the story of how I got from one place to another. I'm in the process. My own, I've been writing chapters for a book that I would like to produce before
Mm.
I die and go to heaven. So I'll be talking to you. My
Sounds good.
last two questions, time is winding down. What church do you attend? Are you back at church? What church do you attend, and what are you doing in your church fellowship? And then tell people why they should purchase your book.
Yeah. So I'm actually in between churches right now. Mark and I attended Gateway Church for probably 10 years. And after he passed, I continued there for was probably in the middle of COVID, that it was just so overwhelming. I was on staff there. I had done too much of life there. And every time I turned around, when I drove onto the parking lot, the flood of memories, and Mark not being there, and the people that just kept coming at me. And they didn't know. They were trying to love on me, or they hadn't heard
Yeah,
the story, so they wanted to know it. It was just too overwhelming. And so
yeah,
in the middle of COVID, the Lord provided an opportunity for me to be part of Life Church, to plant another campus here in Mansfield. I didn't help plant it, but I was part of that small group of people, the interest group that started it. And so I'm still kind of there, but
okay,
I'm also, I knew when I went to Life Church that that was just going to be for a season, that God was calling me to more, to do
okay,
more. And so right now I am watching Elevation Church online, and then
okay.
sometimes still attending Life Church in person. I've thought of starting kind of a home church group in my apartment, but I am in a 55 plus community. And so, the space is limited. I could probably use the clubhouse if I wanted to, because I've also done some things with residents over there. And that's been powerful. So I'm kind of in between right now,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
kind of an awkward place or season for me, because as like even at 12th Baptist and even at Gateway, it's like I'm there and I'm all in serving,
yeah,
doing all the things. But this
yeah.
last couple of years, the season of not having to do, but to actually do the other things that God has called me to do, has been freeing. That said, Elevation Church has a lot of e-group activities.
Okay,
This week is Love Week, for example. And so I'm going to be serving with a group to kind of write some letters to some kids and stuff to encourage them. So I'm doing those kinds of things, but not at the level that I was before. Here's another thing that the Lord released me from. We have this mindset that being a believer and being a part of a church means you do all the things. Like, you take on all of the responsibilities, you volunteer for all the stuff, and the next thing you know, you're burnt out. God hasn't called us to do that. He has called us to go and do where he has called us to go and serve. And no is not a dirty word. It's not a bad word. I think that sometimes in churches, those of us who are willing and gifted and anointed to do are called on to do even more. And that puts more pressure on than God ever intended. So I'm walking in some freedom from that over these last couple of years. And
good.
that's been powerful. But I'm also stepping up to serve where he's asked me to. And some of that has not even been in a church. It's been in my community. And that's been powerful too.
Good.
The question about why should someone buy my book, I think that it was said best on our launch party call yesterday. Um, Even though my story is a story of the loss of my husband, every single human experiences loss and heartbreak and disappointment in some facet or form. Because Jesus said that, while we're here on this earth, on this side of heaven, we're going to experience trouble. Um, and yet there is hope, there is redemption, there's resurrection from the ashes that can only be found in Christ. And my story of being crushed, my story of loss to redemption, to being able to resurrect from life-shattering circumstances, I think speaks to everybody out there. And like I said before, it's not just a book about loss. It's not about just sadness. It's not a story that, just shares all of the heartbreaking moments that I went through. There is some of that, but there's also joy. And there are elements beyond loss and redemption, and resurrection. I talk about marriage. I talk about releasing those things that don't serve you anymore so that you can be able to receive the things that God has. I talk about, renewing a life with God and trusting him, even when you can't trace him, or even if he's not answering questions or your prayers the way that you want him to. And I'm basically talking about dancing in every single reign of life. They're varied, they're multied, some of them are severe, some of them are lightweight. And yet the answer to be able to dance through every single one of them is to dance through them with God, with Jesus as your dance partner. So I think the book can be for anybody and everyone who needs to learn to do that in whatever season of life that they're in.
And again, they can pick the book up where?
On Amazon. Amazon is where it's loaded in both digital and paperback. I'm also working with my web designer to include it on my website, which is gravetogarden.com. I have a tab that's books. There's another tab for my coaching, but there's a specific tab for books. She's working on putting it there so that the digital and paperback copies will still link to Amazon. But if anybody wants an autographed copy, they will get that specifically through the website through me. So I'll, sign it and then mail it to them directly. So.
Technology. Wow.
I know, right? Thank
I didn't.
God for people who understand it. I have the concept and the vision for it.
Yeah.
And then I partner with people who can help me to get it done.
Wow. Wow. The last comment that Beverly is making, she said Lisa Texera is Lisa Powell. That's her married name.
Oh, yes. I was
Yeah.
trying to remember who that was. I was like, I know that name. Oh my goodness. Hello, Lisa Powell. Good to see you. And
Again,
Beverly, thank you for all of your feedback, girlfriend.
yeah, she's
You're
good.
awesome.
She's good. Again, this has been recorded and we're going to upload it to our YouTube pages. It's on 5 Facebook pages. It's on X, and we'll be sending it out to other people. So
Awesome.
this has been good. I'm glad we finally
I
got the
know,
date.
right?
We finally got the time. We finally did it. Now, if there are any other updates that come with the book, things that you want to share with us, even about your life coaching, we can do a broadcast on what that's all about and let
Okay.
people learn about that. Just send me a text and let me know you're interested in. So going to you being a life coach, that will be broadcast number 2. Let me know when we can do something like that for you. I want to stay with
Okay.
you on this whole process and help you to get this book out. We will be putting something on our webpage about this also. So thanks for agreeing to do it. And it's great to finally see you again and talk with you rather than just
Texting.
texting, which is
I
sometimes
agree.
the quick way of
Likewise.
doing it.
Likewise. If you can also, when you upload it to your Facebook groups, if you will tag me, so it'll
Okay.
be on my page too, that would be awesome. Because I
Okay.
know a lot of my followers and friends, I told them about it, and so they're interested in seeing the
Okay.
interview as well. So this has been awesome, Bruce. It's been great reconnecting with you, and again, seeing you face to face on, digital Zoom. And I appreciate your support and this opportunity to share. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Let me stop my recording and stop the streaming, and then we'll be done. Of course,